and YouTube channels. Now, Family Time is about your issues, your relationships. We are your at-home family, your community family. We are your global family. Family Time is produced by Family Life Ministries, and our aim is to enable healthy families, which will lead to a healthy nation. So stay with us and join in our discussion. I'm Tamaya Wilson. Now, our parents, they're in their 70s, their 80s, most of them retired, home maybe, but pretty active, very aware, very involved, very engaging, very, just a part of their community. But some of them, they're not as alert as they used to be. They're not as independent or able to do things as they would, say, 20 or 30 years ago. Maybe when we look at them now, we think to ourselves, that's not the mom or the daddy that I'm used to. They don't look the same. They don't move the same. They probably don't even communicate in the same way. They don't do the same things in the same way. Maybe their priorities have changed, and so has their schedule and even their general living habits. Some things are confusing for them, and probably everything is confusing or different for us. We now have to get used to the new them while still living our lives. And they also have to get used to who they have become. Well, this stage of life is for all of us, and it is inevitable that we will get there. So we might as well just admit it, embrace it, and try to figure it out as we cope. So Rochelle Amore is our guest this evening, and she will help us to do just that. In this first part of Aging, the Family Effect, Rochelle and I will be looking at how families with aging persons deal with COVID-19 and how each of our finances impact the relationship. How are we dealing with it? Or how should we deal with it? While we discuss this, here's what I want you to do. Tell us, what's the scariest thing about getting old? WhatsApp your text and voice notes, not longer than 30 seconds, to 876-997-3125. Post your answers on the Love 101 Facebook page or call the studio lines at 876-968-8327 or 968-8328 to participate. And throughout the program, we will share your comments. Now we'll be right back after this short break.
Hello, today we're going to be making breakfast and preparing a lunchbox for school. Let's start with some sugar and salt and wash it down with a nice big glass of more sugar. And now for the lunchbox. Let's put in saturated fat, more salt, and sugar. Foods high in salt, fats, and sugar increase the risk of hypertension, obesity, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes. Now more than ever, we have the right to know what's in our food. Give us warning labels on the front of our food packages.
A message from the Heart Foundation of Jamaica, Ministry of Health and Wellness, and partners.
Life comes at you fast and it can hit hard. Apply for the Credit Union Prepaid MasterCard from C&WJ with chip and PIN protection. Need a card with a personal line of credit for emergencies? We have that. Need a card you can use to shop online for that must-have item? We have that. The community and workers of Jamaica Prepaid MasterCard. All the convenience of a MasterCard. Discover the benefits of belonging.
You know the saying, it takes a village to raise a child? We Jamaicans have been practicing this for years, a long time same thing. There's a family in need, a child in distress. You open your heart and home to love up the child as your own. Them glad bag bus and yours too for years and years to come. Jamaican Christians, we need you to come in and fill up the village. Taking a child and raise him as your own. Taking a child and build up the nation. Ask Family Life Ministries about the For the Child Foster Care Program. Call 876-816-0889 today. This message is brought to you by Family Life Ministries in partnership with the Child Protection and Family Services Agency and Nairn Family Homes Canada.
Slow internet, nah keep again. Switch and get 1 month free on Jamaica's fastest network. Speed on over to Digicel and try our 30-day Prime bundle free for 1 month. Loaded with data, local calls, and text. Wait, it gets better. Plus, get enough more data to enjoy more of the movies, music, and sports you want with your Digicel lifestyle apps. If you're on the go, you can't afford to be slow. Switch to Jamaica's fastest network and keep your number. Visit the store today or message us at Digicel Jamaica on socials for more details. Digicel, better together.
Back to family time on Love 101. Our special guest this evening, or call the studio lines at 876-968-8327 to 8 to participate. And throughout the program, we will share your thoughts. How are you doing, Rochelle?
Hi, Tamaya. I'm fine. Thank you so much for having me on today.
It's great to have you, Rochelle. Now, when most of us think about our parents, we remember the provider, the problem solver, the strong, the in control, know it all answer, know all the answers adults. But as we age, and we all do, a lot of things change. How and why do these changes take place? We're going to find out from Rochelle today. So, Rochelle, you know, for a 70 to 80 plus year old person pre COVID, what was life like? How was life different for them?
So that's a very loaded question because so much has changed for all of us.
Yes.
And some of the same changes that we've experienced and the same frustrations and stresses that we've been dealing with, I mean, older persons have similar,
Mhm.
the same challenges.
Yes.
Notably in a country like Jamaica in the Caribbean, where so many older persons, 70, 80, have to continue working to survive.
Yes.
That meant, unfortunately, like many people, a loss of income.
Mhm.
It's also restricted persons' movement. It's also limited their access to care. So as someone who's definitely not quite near 70 or 80 just yet, I can't
Yeah.
tell you exactly how it was. People have very different circumstances and
Mhm.
situations, but I
Yes.
can speak to what the research has shown and what we've been seeing in the media, especially
Right.
in terms
Right.
of the impact that COVID now has had
Mhm.
on daily life for many older persons.
Okay. Before we go into the impact of COVID, however, um, and I want to talk a little bit about the things that generally bother the 70s and 80-year-olds in our lives. What's going through their mind?
Yeah. Again, I would hate to want to speak on anybody's behalf, but from the people that
From your research
from our research, the
and
people
those
that
you've
we work
spoken to.
with, and also I can, speaking from my experience with the older persons in my life, um,
Yes.
I think the idea of how am I going to manage after retirement, for example, financially.
Yes.
How am I going to make ends meet, especially now with COVID and those challenges? Um,
Yes.
you know, I know the question on the scariest thing about getting older. I'm very
Mhm.
curious to see those responses, but I know that for a lot of older persons, what's on their minds is I don't really want to become a burden.
Yeah.
I'm afraid of changing ill health because
Mhm.
this is a period of change, right? We're all human, and as
Yes.
humans, we continue to grow and change. It's not that life stops at 60 or 65.
Right.
So we continue experiencing these different phases and seasons. And
Mhm.
so, like anything else, like any other point in life, that brings their own concerns and worries. Um,
Yes.
but when you are transitioning out of full time work and a full time
Mhm.
income,
Right.
um,
Right.
and when you are maybe declining in terms of, your body isn't doing what it used to anymore, as well as it used to, these are the kinds of things that definitely preoccupy older persons. And it's things that we don't like to talk about.
Yes.
Right? Nobody wants to think and talk about these almost depressing issues. Nobody
Yes.
wants to think about getting older, but that really just it contributes to these stereotypes and the myths and the lack of understanding that we have around the
Mhm.
experience of aging. and it
Yeah.
prevents us from really being that support, not just as a family unit, but the family as the building block of our society, right? As a
Yeah.
community. If we don't think about and discuss what these challenges really are and the unique needs that arise, then we can't find ways to better support older persons
Mm-hmm.
during these
Mm-hmm.
times.
Uh, I don't know if this comes out in your research, but what are the things that goes through the minds of the adult children of these aging parents?
It is definitely, like you mentioned in earlier on, it's a shift in perspective, and
Yeah.
that's part of growing up too, right? You get to
Mm-hmm.
see your parent as a very human, flawed, not perfect,
Yes.
complicated, and that relationship differs from person to person, household to household.
Right.
There are so many factors and dynamics and considerations. There's history. Sometimes, it's not always positive or
Yeah.
good history. And so all of those things come into play when
Mm-hmm.
adult children are now maybe growing into that role of having to think about mom or dad in terms of
Yeah.
supporting them, in terms of looking after them if they may be falling ill, if they have medical concerns, or
Right.
as that decline and that aging begins. Not that aging equals decline, but we know the nature of aging.
Right.
We are at higher risk for illness and
Mm-hmm.
disability. So it is very concerning, when you start to think about how am I going to afford if mommy or daddy needs, some
Right.
support. It's also a bit stressful, maybe even sometimes exhausting to have
Mm-hmm.
to now figure out, okay, how do I get mom or dad to listen or hear me when all
Yeah.
I'm trying to do is help them. All I'm trying to do
Yeah.
is I'm trying to be a good daughter, a good son, but
Mm-hmm.
they wouldn't listen, because
Yeah.
that role, that
The
shift
role
in that
reversal,
dynamic, that
reversal.
role reversal,
Right. Right.
it's not an easy thing to navigate. We have to be
Mm-hmm.
very, very careful and very mindful and
Yeah.
considerate when we are in those relationships. Otherwise, it can be a very resentful and very stressful experience for both
Mm-hmm.
the parent and child.
Yeah. One of the information I came across once is that the adult child is kind of sandwiched in between caring for their children and caring for their parents, and that can be a very stressful time for a lot of them. Do you have any information on that sandwich generation, I think it's called?
Definitely, there's a lot of research and work that goes into looking at the challenges around being a member of that sandwich generation, because
Yeah.
you're getting pulled and drained in two directions in terms of your
Yes.
role, in terms
Yeah.
of your support role. There's only so much time in the day, and
Mhm.
we know disproportionately that that role tends to fall on women.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
it's even more of a challenge, but that makes it a bit tricky because now, we have to figure out, okay, instead of having this all fall on me, how can I work with my spouse, my
Right.
siblings, my
Yes.
family? How can I interrupt that usual dynamic, which is
You're
it
right.
all falls on one daughter, or
Hmm.
one female relative, and that requires a lot of planning, a lot of frank conversations and thinking
Yes.
ahead. And again, it comes back to we don't want to think about that. But
Hmm.
it's important to think about it quite openly and not let
Yes, and to talk about it.
not let it get
Yeah.
a hold of us.
Right, right. I want to remind our listeners this is Family Time on Love 101, and I hope you have not forgotten to tell us what's the scariest thing about getting old. WhatsApp, text, and voice notes no longer than 30 seconds to 876-997-3125. Post on the Love 101 Facebook page or call the studio lines at 876-968-8327 or 968-8328 to participate. I'm also encouraging you to friend us on Facebook at FLM Family Life Ministries, follow us on Instagram at FLMJA, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Family Life Ministries FLMJA. The numbers for the FLM head office are 876-920-1034 or 876-926-8101. We'll be back shortly.
Fellow Jamaicans, there are children in our nation in need of a safe and loving Christian home. Family Life Ministries, in collaboration with the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, will train and support you as a foster family. This is one way of playing your part in advancing the welfare of the whole human race. To find out more about the For the Child Foster Care Program, call 876-816-0889 today. This message is brought to you by Family Life Ministries in partnership with the Child Protection and Family Services Agency and Nairn Family Homes Canada.
Listen for the Morning Watch Tuesday, July 6th at 7 a.m. with host Stokely Marshall. In the first watch, the U.S. Pentagon and unidentified flying objects. And in the second watch, will there be a future where commercial planes will fly without pilots? That's the Morning Watch Tuesday, July 6th at 7 a.m. with host Stokely Marshall, right here on Love 101, the family station.
Let's get up and go. Time to explore.
It's here! I love summer!
The time you have been waiting for is here.
Don't miss out on the exciting features and engaging discussions.
As Love 101, the family station goes through the nation,
highlighting people, places, and the peculiar promises of Jamaica land we love.
It's I Love Summer. You won't be bored.
You will laugh and play.
You will worship and pray.
You'll be educated and edified.
Don't miss a beat.
I love summer. It's time to explore.
I love it. 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 I love summer.
Back to Family Time. I am your host, Amaya Wilson, and Family Time is brought to you by Family Life Ministries. And we're talking about aging and the effect that it's taking on the family and our parents' age. Now, COVID-19 has made all of this aging even more difficult, at least even more different. Children having to be, in some cases, boss of the home just to keep their parents safe. How has COVID, and I'm going to ask Rochelle, our guest, to answer this question, how has COVID made it even more difficult or different for both the 70s, 80s-year-olds and their adult children?
So I can tell you from the experience of my grandmother, for example, who's in her 80s, it has been a very stressful and limiting time. I know that a lot of people had a lot of trouble managing the lack of independence or the loss of independence and freedom to move about as they would have wanted to, because older persons are very active. You know, we speak about role reversals, but sometimes these roles do stay in place. There are many households, for example, where an older person's pension, a grandparent's or parent's pension is supporting the entire family.
Yes.
So it's not the case for every household, and in the household where an older person is used to jumping in their car, going to their CCRP meetings, going to the market, going to the grocery store.
Right.
Maybe they're still working part-time.
Right.
My grandmother, she led a dance class in the community center.
Wow.
And she says to me all the time how stressful and unhappy it makes her, thinking that okay, she can't go outside because she is vulnerable, and messaging around COVID-19 as well.
Right.
It would be very, very anxiety inducing for older persons. It would to be frank, it can be terrifying. for older persons. And so you go from living your life as usual to being locked up.
Yes.
And, it's not just the lack of mobility and freedom and independence, but it was also, to some extent, the confusing messaging that was coming out during this time. It's COVID-19, a once in a lifetime experience, an event, and there was so much very contradictory and sensationalized information getting to older persons, especially the WhatsApp comments, yes, the WhatsApp messages.
Yes.
Um, and that made it even more challenging for older persons to navigate and understand what was happening,
Right.
because it wasn't always clear what
Or consistent
information
the
was
information.
correct. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And remembering that my grandmother, for example, saw the invention of color TV, and then the internet and the computer and the phone, and now mass social media and all of this bombarding,
Yeah.
it was a bit challenging for a lot of people to navigate. On the other hand, I know people in their 70s, for example, who are running businesses
Yeah.
in, for example, sectors that were very hard hit.
Mm-hmm.
What about them? What are those restrictions? What is the impact on them and
Right.
households that they need to provide for? Um, and then, of course, there was, some research that we did around people who are ill, older persons who are unwell, living with dementia and being looked after by a loved one.
Yes.
They found a lot of challenges in terms of accessing healthcare and social care supports, um,
Right.
having that mobility, even something as simple as grieving when there's a loved one that's lost.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Um,
Yes. Yes.
that was really challenging, and that work was done at the Ministry of Health and Wellness's National Health Research Conference last year by my colleague Marissa Stubbs. So, there are so many different factors happening and affecting older persons during this
Yeah.
time. That's definitely made it a challenging context to live in.
Yes.
And unfortunately, the lack of specific supports for older persons
Yes.
did not help. And that's not specific to Jamaica. That
Right.
was seen globally. We saw worldwide uproar around
Right.
how are you going to impose all of these restrictions. Granted, we appreciate it's for the health and safety and well-being of our
Right.
older persons, without considering what the impact is having on them,
Right.
on their
Right.
families, on their livelihoods, on their mental health and well-being.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I think that in terms of the sensationalist and terrifying messaging, um,
Mm-hmm.
and in terms of the implementation of certain protocols without, I guess, sufficient input from older persons who
Right.
it really adversely affected. I think globally
Mm-hmm.
we've all learned a big lesson around how
Yes.
we, how we interact and work
And the
with
importance of socializing and
definitely.
connection, physical face-to-face connection.
Absolutely. Huge lesson. Huge lesson.
Yes, yes. Now I want to read some comments from our listeners on WhatsApp. Good evening. The thing I'm concerned about with aging is losing my independence. I'm grateful for the aging process though. And that's from Christine, who is from Maryland. Another one. I really glad to hear this topic. Honestly, this is something I think of very often growing old. I have children, but they're now raising their families and they're caring for their children, but wouldn't want to be an added trouble to trouble. I discussed it with the two eldest, but it often come across my mind as the years progress. I'm not retired, but I love to think ahead. All right, that person didn't put the name. But there you go, with the sense of becoming a burden seems to be coming out a lot. I know for me, um, just the lack of independence is something that I think about. That's scary. Just not having my faculties together and not being able to move around in the way that I would like to move around. Those being restricted, you know, um, would be scary about getting old for me. Yeah.
Yeah. That's something we all had a bit of a preview of during this pandemic to some extent.
Right. Right. You
Yeah.
mentioned your grandmother. She
Yes.
that she's in her 80s. My grandmother is in her 80s as well. And she is a very active person. She doesn't have dementia, doesn't have Alzheimer's. She goes to church. She's very involved. She's always busy. I can go visit her and she's not there. Right? I need to call when I'm going, kind of busy.
Yeah.
And she gets around, she goes to the supermarket, she goes and she deals with her stuff. And she's very independent, and COVID has locked her down, you know. And she looks forward to going to the hairdresser with her friends. So there's a neighbor who lives near to her, and they've been friends for longer than I've been alive. And they go to the hairdresser together, and that's her little outing because we do her grocery shopping, we pay her bills, we take care of everything. And so it's her one opportunity to get out of the house. And that has been very restrictive for her, you know. And I can imagine that it's one thing to be physically restricted and say, boy, all right, my leg hurting me, or I'm not able to do so and so, but to be able to go around physically and not be able because of the restrictions of COVID can be very, very stressful. It has been for young people, and even more so, I believe, for older persons who don't use social media as much, so they're not connecting as much with their family members and their friends. I can imagine that must be pretty difficult for them.
Absolutely. And that's what we're seeing happening.
Yeah, yeah.
Unfortunately.
What does the family need to do though to help each other through COVID?
Communication, communication, right?
Yeah.
Key in any relationship, in any dynamic.
Yes.
It has been a really taxing time.
Mhm.
And you're in the same space, especially 24/7 now. If you are working at home and you are observing the stay-at-home orders, it can be a new experience too, spending all that time together. Especially even the
Right.
grandchildren. We talk about adult children, but the grandchildren are also home from school.
Yes.
I think they're on summer now, but we're at home schooling.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a need now for this kind of working together and communicating together to figure out a new routine,
Right.
to figure out how to kind of find outlets, both together and independently, within the
Yes.
home, things that are realistic and feasible. So like you just
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, not a lot of older persons, mind you, are very savvy
Yes.
with the technology, but not all are going to be able to join webinars and Zoom meetings,
Right.
etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
So we
Mm-hmm.
do need to think, a bit in a down to earth way around, okay, how can I help, mom, dad, granny, grandpa, uncle, auntie, to really stay active, feel included, feel
Right.
stimulated, get that exercise in, and really take breaks and kind of manage to navigate this time, because things are changing every day. We don't really know what's going to happen, um,
Right.
and that's the scary part, right? We don't know what's going to happen. So the sooner that
Yes.
we communicate about it and try to work together to build in that routine, thinking
Yes.
ahead, planning, getting creative about what we can and cannot do and who can do what to help who,
Yes.
I think the easier it might be to manage
Yeah.
the family.
And we also need to be flexible. So if we try
Yeah,
something and it doesn't work, we need to be able to say, okay, that didn't work. What can we do differently?
exactly. Trial and error.
Yeah. And as I said, that communication in that process is going to be so important.
Absolutely.
I want to remind our listeners that this is Family Time on Love 101. We're also on the Love 101 Facebook page and their YouTube channel. Family Time is produced by Family Life Ministries. What's the scariest thing about getting old? Tell us via WhatsApp text and voice notes no longer than 30 seconds at 876-997-3125 on the Love 101 Facebook page, or call the studio lines at 876-968-8327 or 8 to participate. We're also on Facebook and YouTube Live. We want to hear from you. Don't go away. We're talking finances when we get back.
Bring the family
has many services for diabetics. Stop by for your free blood sugar machine while stocks last. The time by Live Well Pharmacy is
Hey, a minute moving down past the hour 6 o'clock right here in Family Radio Love 101.
You know the saying, it takes a village to raise a child? We Jamaicans have been practicing this them glad bag bus and yours too for years and years to come. Jamaican Christians, we need you to come in and fill up the village. Taking a child and raise him as your own. Taking a child and build up the nation. Ask Family Life Ministries about the For the Child Foster Care Program. Call 876-816-0889 today. This message is brought to you by Family Life Ministries in partnership with the Child Protection and Family Services Agency and Nairn Family Homes, Canada.
Okay, welcome back. It is 6:02 p.m. and you're tuned to Love 101. This is Family Time, brought to you by Family Life Ministries, FLM. FLM provides counseling for people with all kinds of challenges from all walks of life. Listen out for our numbers in Kingston and Portmore. We'll give them at the end of the program. Remember that we are Facebook and YouTube Live, so tune into the program via Facebook Live or Facebook page and our Love 101 YouTube channel. Rochelle Amore is our special guest today. She is a gerontologist. She has worked in aging for the past 10 years and leads stakeholder communications to help raise awareness about issues affecting older persons in Jamaica and the wider Caribbean. Now, Rochelle, welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay. So, how is life different for the 70s and 80-year-olds who, before they were earning their own money? What's different now that a lot of them are probably, not bringing in an income?
Well, fortunately for many older persons,
Yes.
there is that pension, not nearly as helpful as we would like, but
Yeah.
um, there is that support, and I think we mentioned earlier, because we can't really talk about the impact of COVID without talking about the financial impact as well.
Right.
And so we've seen that some older persons, they still have to work and make a living, but when you are no longer able to work, or you have entered that retirement phase, so many people come to us and say, I had no idea that it would be this expensive
Right.
to be retired and to live, have my goal. And I did not calculate it accurately. I did not think ahead. I thought, what was in place was sufficient. You work for 30, 40, 50 years of your life. You expect that after retirement,
Your pension.
that you would be taken care of.
Yes.
And that is not always the case at all.
Mhm.
So that's a huge change. That's a huge change in terms of feelings of not just independence and financial well-being and being able to make ends meet and not having that worry, but
Right.
also, earning an income, earning a regular salaried income, gives a lot of people, I think gives almost all of us, a real sense of value, of purpose. We're contributing.
Right.
So it is a very big transition for a lot of people, and they're almost always surprised. They're almost
Yeah.
always, no matter how many times we try to prepare, no matter how well
Yes.
we try to educate and prepare around retirement, because people are living so much longer.
Yes.
You have to really plan for 20, 30, sometimes 40 years
40
after
years.
retirement. And that is of
A long time to live without an income. To live on savings, yes.
Exactly. So money becomes an issue, and it's something that we as a family, we have to figure out for our older loved ones.
Right. Yes. No, so they're generally thinking about, being able to make ends meet. Is there anything else about money that is on their minds a lot?
Definitely. And thank you for asking that, because when you ask the question about what is your biggest fear, one of my biggest fears is something that happens all the time, which is financial exploitation, abuse,
Mm.
fraud, and kind of being taken advantage of in different
Yes.
ways of your resources, and not having someone to advocate for you. That's really
Right.
my thing, not having someone to advocate for me when I'm no longer being able to advocate as loudly for myself anymore. Um, and that is a real challenge,
Yes.
because you are, on the one hand, you want to be able to support your family, right? We mentioned earlier that with the impact of COVID, there are some households where the older person is really supporting and supplementing with their income, and that
Right.
has been compromised. And then there are other households, there's so much variability, and so much, nothing is going to be the same from household to household.
Right.
But there are also a huge amount of households where older people actually are quite well off, because they made the right investments or they purchased the right assets. And so they
Right.
become a bit of a target as well,
Mm.
especially if they're living alone, or if,
Right.
they don't
Their
have.
children are not nearby or they don't have
Correct.
children. Yeah.
Correct. And that's a very common issue in the Caribbean, where your children gone away abroad and then you're kind of exposed. So that's also a concern. And then, of course, illness, ill health, the cost of
Yes.
care, the cost of healthcare, medication, doctor's visits, specialist tests, etc., etc. From the time there's an issue, it becomes a stress, it becomes a worry, it becomes something to make you anxious as an older person, because
Right.
this is going to be a huge cost, a huge hit.
Yeah.
So I think that from what we hear, the feedback and the research, those are some major challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we have a comment on, is it YouTube Live or Facebook? Marlene Da Costa, Facebook Live. The scariest thing is getting sick, all kinds of complications with illnesses, and that's so true.
Yep. And
Losing your health.
it is. It's hard, and it's not just, of course, it's scary. And I mean, unfortunately, illness is
Hmm.
it happens.
Right.
But imagine going through that pain or that change or that scary time and not knowing how you're going to pay for it, or not being able to pay for it.
Right.
That's the reality that a lot of old people face. So that's
Hmm.
something that we have to really be more open and vocal about, when we
Right.
speak to older persons in our society. Because it's ridiculous.
Hmm.
Healthcare is a very, very high cost.
Right. Yeah. Now, what do our elders need financially? I hear you say that a lot of them are always surprised. Well, not a lot, they're always surprised about what it takes to be retired. Like, what do they need financially, that is?
The thing that nobody wants to talk about: estate planning, preparing
Yes.
a will, planning ahead. We used to have a saying when we used to do this kind of work in Trinidad, where, as you can tell, it's where I'm from. Where there's a will, there's a relative you probably should not trust who's trying to change it.
Mm.
Where there's a will, there's a way, because it's the truth. And so the more that you plan and put in place to protect yourself and to ensure as much as you can that you
Mm.
are taken care of, and that you can at least try to manage whatever might come up, the better it will serve you if, God forbid, something happens and you are no longer able to make those decisions
Right.
and arrangements for yourself.
Mhm.
Something else that we see come up a lot when it comes to dementia, for example, persons who develop dementia, is the need for a trusted person to help you manage your affairs beforehand, to have that person added, have a joint bank account with them. Something very, very small and simple, right? A trusted person you can depend on, because the legalities of getting sick and
Yeah.
the money and accessing the money and the power of attorney doesn't apply for certain it's very complicated and can be an added unnecessary stress. But if you plan
Yeah.
and think ahead and you have those things stipulated in your will, for example, or in
Right.
in your with your lawyer or what have you, it could really make things a lot more manageable to navigate and
Right.
can help smooth over the very tricky dynamics that can come with
Mm-hmm.
having a family. Um, I would also say that our elders need more age-friendly financial institutions and support
Right.
from that end.
Mm-hmm.
When you have older persons who, I see it all the time, the people encouraging older people to bank online and don't bother to go in the line and so on and so forth, and not always considering the challenges of I might have arthritis, I might
Right.
be disabled, I have living with a disability. My vision is impaired and I just cannot see
I
the
can't
future.
afford internet,
I can't afford
and I
it.
don't think it's a necessity.
There you go, right?
Yeah.
All of these things are
Mm-hmm.
uh, something that we almost forget to factor in. Older
Yeah.
persons have a role to play and they bring absolute value to our community, and as such they should be included and considered when we are progressing or we're designing
Mm-hmm.
products and services, especially in the financial world when older
Mm-hmm.
people may be a target for financial fraud and exploitation, or
Right.
they may be trying to find ways to better plan and protect themselves in the
Mm-hmm.
long run.
Yes. Yeah. Now, how can they maintain their financial independence?
Definitely, education, which really comes from talking about it, asking questions.
Right.
How do I figure out my estate? How do I even? You may not have it, you don't need to have tons of properties and assets and investments to have a will, right? People
Right.
think, oh, I don't need to have one
I
because
don't have anything to give away.
exactly, right? You would be so surprised. You would be
Mm-hmm.
so
I said
surprised.
the fact that when you die, the fight over the pot.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It's so true, right? So you might not think about it as a means to maintaining your financial independence in later life, but when it
Right.
is that you are no longer able to keep track of these things and keep an eye on people and be up and about,
Right.
and you may be being cared for or supported by a loved one, you want to have a little bit of independence in knowing I made a decision
Right.
around how I wanted this to go or who I wanted
Yes.
to help manage this.
Mm-hmm.
When it gets that, if and when I get to that point.
Yeah.
Um, Definitely being aware of fraud, these scams, these schemes. Every now and again, my grandmother would send me this WhatsApp message that I know is completely false and a real scam, but she would check it with me, right?
Yeah.
Because she is looking a little suspicious. Um,
Yeah.
and people, they don't want to talk about it because maybe it's pride, maybe as navigating any change and phase in life
Right.
can be challenging, especially when it comes to you might be experiencing a decline. So you don't want to share, you don't want to feel like you need the help, but
Right.
asking for help, planning ahead, educating yourself, asking the questions, learning about what you need to be aware of can be really, really key to maintaining
Yes.
that independence later on.
Now, again, I'm asking our listeners, what's the scariest thing about getting old? During the well, we won't take a break right now, but we still want to hear from you. Please WhatsApp your text and voice note answers not longer than 30 seconds to 876-997-3125. Post on the Love 101 Facebook page or call the studio lines at 876-968-8327 or 8 to participate. I'm Tamaya Wilson and I'm here with Rochelle Amore. And we are talking about aging, the family effect. And Rochelle, we're back to you. How do we understand what they need, or aging parents, and how do we meet each other at that same place without making them feel like they're a burden?
Communication is certainly a two-way street.
Yes.
And, as we become the adult children, and we're all going to get there at some point, God willing, we may think that we know what is best. And
Mhm.
we are completely convinced that, mom or dad, they need to listen to us, grand and grandpa. Um, but listening is important, because you're
Yes.
not going to understand what the other person needs or what their concerns are or what they're really going through if you're not prepared to listen. And, you know, as people, human beings, we tend to get very frustrated and very easily impatient if we feel like we're not being heard,
Right.
right? So we definitely need to have almost create that kind of safe space of communication where we're willing to both speak and listen without
Right.
judgment, to try and hear where the other person is coming from. And that's where
Mhm.
something like a counseling session,
Yes.
which I know is provided, that can at the ministries, that can really help a family
Right.
navigate a big change or a big shift. For example,
Right.
there's an
Mhm.
illness, or you know, we're considering, after retirement, or we're considering a change in living arrangements. There's a need for
Right.
peer support. There's so many dynamics and things that are happening
Mhm.
in this later part of life that we're
Yeah.
not always familiar with or don't feel comfortable navigating. We don't really know what to do. So we have to communicate.
Right.
Um, and also just very simply, putting ourselves in their shoes, what we would do with anybody,
Yeah.
who we are trying to meet in the middle. We're trying to understand each other's perspectives and work
Yeah.
together to ensure that this aging experience is both safe and with dignity for our loved ones, but also with minimal stress for ourselves.
Okay. We have a call online, Rochelle. Just a moment. Good evening. You're on Love 101.
Sister Ray,
Yes, I'm here.
go ahead.
Yes, good evening.
Yes. Good evening.
Yes, I'm here.
Tell us about it, what you think.
With the fear part of it,
Yes.
I am a person who love to talk.
Yes.
So to get old and not able to talk with people, I believe that would be my biggest fear.
Mhm.
So what I do, I make arrangements from now, and I tell my children, don't build me a back room, but put me in a lovely nursing home. I can play two domino and make some friends.
Okay.
And I've been saying that to them forever, because
Yes.
I believe the fear to just be by yourself, not able to communicate with a
Yeah.
little mouth like mine, then that would be hard for me.
Okay.
But
Thank you so much.
I believe if the person is retire and able, like say for instance a teacher or so, and they feel like continue to do a little work, nothing
Yeah.
is wrong with it.
Okay.
It's up to how the person feel. But
Yes.
as I said, we are all have to prepare for the old age, the pension and all of that. So
Mhm.
it's best to save towards it also, not to depend on our children to take care of us.
Okay. Okay. And what's your name again? Remind me, please.
I'm Sister Rary.
Sister Rary. Yes.
Your name.
Thank you. Thank you.
All
Thanks
right,
for
you're welcome.
sharing. Bless you.
Yes,
You know,
you.
Rochelle, as she shared that first point that she said to her children that she wants to go to a nursing home, communicating that is so important, because some children might be thinking, that's not what I would want for my mother. But if you know that this is what your mom wants and why your mother wants this, it takes the burden off to try and make a decision, and maybe even arguments between you and your siblings about what is going to be best for mommy or best for daddy. Well, mommy and daddy already told you 10 years ago, and they've been saying it for everybody to hear, this is what I want.
and they've documented it.
Yes.
Right, they put it in writing, and that's the importance of inclusion and choice, and
Yes.
ensuring that you put things in place. But that was really surprising as well to hear, because
Yes.
in our work on the Stride Dementia Research Project, where we work with caregivers of loved ones with dementia, living with
Yes.
dementia, there's so much turmoil, so much stress around making a decision like that.
Yes.
Some children will say, I will never put mommy in a home. It's my responsibility. I'm going to care for her. She looks after me. I'm going to look after her.
Yes.
But like you said, you don't know what mommy would have, of course,
Yes.
situations will vary, and there's so many different
Right.
things to take into account. But if we have a sense of, and we're thinking about what mom or dad would want, especially if they're
Yes.
not at a point where they can vocalize that themselves,
Mhm.
that makes things a lot. We feel more comfortable in ourselves about how we make those decisions, for sure.
Right. Right. We have another comment from WhatsApp. Good afternoon. The scariest thing about getting old for me is not being able to do stuff for myself, because he or she, yeah, she is very independent. And this is Angie from Time and Patience. So thanks, Angie, for sharing that. Not being able to do things for ourselves.
Big thing. That's a big thing for so many people, and that's why it's so important. Um, as people are living longer and older people are becoming a larger and larger share of our communities, to really put as many facilities, resources, infrastructural changes, little things to help people maintain independence, right?
Yes.
Because I was always I was so surprised the first time that I traveled to the UK, and I saw that all of the public transportation buses had that wheelchair access ramp. So
Right.
it didn't matter if you did, it did matter, of course, but even if you were in a wheelchair and you've lost mobility to some extent for whatever reason,
You could
you
still
would
get
still
around.
be able to get around very, fairly easily. And so
Yes.
little things like that, are what we are trying to work towards when we talk about age-friendly communities, age-friendly
Yes.
institutions, age-friendly infrastructure.
Right.
Because even though there are certain things we might not be able to control, we can't control the vision getting a little bit blurry. We can't
Right.
control the bones getting a little bit stiffer. If we have certain things in place to support us and allow us to maintain our independence as far as possible, even
Right.
when those things do occur, that can make a big difference. And
Right.
that's why we do the work that we do. But for now, in the reality that we face, as a family, we can get together and try and figure it out, just in the hope.
Right.
How can we help? How can we support mom or dad to try and feel included, feel independent,
Right.
feel valued, even though
Mhm.
there is that decline happening that
Yeah.
can't be helped.
One of the things about our culture, you can tell me if it's the same in Trinidad, we don't want to talk about death and getting old and dying and getting sick and putting things in place for negative events, because we feel like you're speaking it into being. Like if you say it, it's going to happen, or you're bringing down death on you. You're bringing it. You're making it more of a reality when you start to talk about it, and so that prevents us, many of us, from making plans for our future, and making our family members know our wishes, because you can't say, if I die, then I want this and this. This is how I want my funeral to be. Or if I'm getting too sick for you to manage, put me in a nursing home. You're not to talk about those things, mama, and leave it alone. Don't bother think about that. You're too negative. And so we don't want to talk about it. Is it like that in your culture as well?
I think it's like that in many, many cultures, in many places, right? And there's some research around this too, and there's a whole field, of course, around palliative care and
Right.
supporting caring for people during that transition,
Yeah.
death and illness and death. And it is absolutely important because it starts off with something as not as simple, but something as early as planning for retirement.
Yeah.
And then planning for ill health. What happens if I
Mhm.
have to go to hospital? And then what
Right.
happens if, I don't want to, everybody's biggest fear, I don't want to
I
have
think,
that decline. I don't want to lose my independence. I don't want to get
or
sick.
that's not going to happen.
Yeah,
Full
that's
stop.
not
So
going
we
to
won't need to
happen.
talk about it.
But if we would like to live to see a ripe old age, these things
Yes,
are highly
are going to
likely.
happen,
They
right?
are going to happen. Not even they are going to happen. So it's really important that we again educate ourselves, and that's not just for older persons. That's for everyone. Members of the
Mm-hmm.
family, grandchildren, educate, educate, educate. Become aware of how to put things in place, how to plan from now.
Right.
If you're looking to buy a house and there's stairs, ask yourself, if for one day mom or dad has to move in with me, how is that going to work?
Right.
Should I think about, is there space to make alterations?
Mm-hmm.
Many times, we have caregivers who say they have to move a whole bedroom downstairs to the living room
Yeah.
because of accessibility reasons,
Right.
So
Right.
planning ahead as a family
And talk with mommy and daddy.
and
So
communicate.
they, this is what I'm thinking. This is a
Yes.
concern for me. And mommy may say, well, why are you worrying about that? I don't plan to be here with you. When that time happens, send me to the nursing home.
And there's your plan, right?
You're
But those
right.
plans cost money too. So
Yes.
as the adult children and as well as the person who's getting older, you really have to think about how we're going to pool these resources. What kind
Right.
of investments can we make in our future, even if it's a little
Mhm.
bit at a time, right?
Right.
Little bit that can make a difference. What supports are there available to help
Mm-hmm.
us if this were to become an issue? And
Right.
really, there's so many things out there as well people don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
So really learning together as a family and talking about it, even if there's that hesitation and resistance, people
Right.
are sensitized. The more we bring it up, the gently we bring it up, the
Right.
in consideration, you have that listening ear, you might put a spin on it, well, so and so's friend, maybe
Yes.
friend's mom or whatever. What do
What do you think?
what
Yeah.
do you think? We speak about it among our siblings, with our spouse, etc. It can really make a huge difference. When we get to that point,
Mhm.
it's not like a huge slap in the face and we don't know what to do.
Right.
That
Right.
makes the challenging situation even worse.
Yeah. Yeah. We have another comment, Tracy from Mona. Some of these young people just want you dead to get the insurance monies. It's a sad road we have to trod. What is what is really the beginner's old age though? I guess she wants to know at what age is considered old age.
Yes, so it depends. For certain reasons, policy reasons, it may be 50. I think you can join
Mm-hmm.
therapy at 50 or 55. For pension and retirement on a more governmental level, we say 60, 65. And then
Yes.
when we speak about certain illnesses and risk, we look at the oldest old, which is 80 onward.
Right.
That point about, collecting insurance and being able to, that's why it's so important to specify who you trust. It can
Yes.
be a lawyer or a company designated that you don't even, or you're not even related to.
Right.
If you sense, and these things happen, people are not perfect, and you don't know what the dynamics have been, right?
Right.
There's so many factors at play. So
Mm-hmm.
if that is a concern, or it may become a concern, put it in place. So
Right.
to
And have
provide
it in writing.
correct.
We're going to take one last comment. We don't have any children, and we often wonder who will be there for us, as realistically, we will not be able to function as we are doing now. We are in our 60s. Also, what could be some of the reasons for depression, and how can this be dealt with? My mom and a few of the older women as church sisters are depressed. Thanks much. Share. So
Share.
that's a big question at the end. I don't know how you can compress an answer for share and then
I
refer her to Family Life Ministries.
Exactly, right? Counseling, but it's something that we expect to see a huge spike in during the pandemic and after the pandemic for a lot of
Right.
people. And if you're and I'm hearing in backstage that it will be dealt with on a different program. But
Right.
COVID has really put a lot of us in that position, so you're not alone, and we
Right.
understand now the importance of socialization and contact. And in terms of
Mm-hmm.
planning ahead, if you don't have children, fortunately, we are seeing the homes, the facilities, the care facilities, the agencies, another relative. Try
Right.
to write things in place so that whoever is managing your estate, maybe it may be a lawyer or a trusted distant relative, can set things up in such a way that you are taken care of perhaps by private facilities, perhaps by someone else, and you are able to put adapt the infrastructure in your home as far as possible to support you as independently as possible,
Right.
for as long as you can before you really need to get to the point where you need care. And by then,
Yeah.
hopefully, you would have had things specified around what that could look like. And in 20 years, who knows what the options might be in terms of care facilities.
Right.
We're hoping and we're
Hopefully that
longing
we
that
are
we're moving to
advancing.
those things. Correct.
Yes, yes. Thanks for being here with us. If you have questions of a personal nature or you're concerned about a friend or a family member, call us at Family Life Ministries. For our center in Portmore at 117 Cecile Avenue, call 876-939-7917. For our counselors in Kingston and other parts of the island, contact our head office at 876-920-1034 or 926-8101, and we will connect you. Remember, if you or someone you know would like counseling on dealing with this or any issue in family, relationships, or just everyday life, contact a Family Life Ministries counselor. Note that due to COVID, appointments can only be made by calling the offices. Otherwise, keep up to date with what's happening with Family Life Ministries and our programs. Find us on Facebook at FLM Family Life Ministries, on Instagram at FLMJA, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Family Life Ministries FLMJA. Before we leave you, a verse for this evening. Moses was 120 years old when he died, yet his eyesight was clear and he was as strong as ever. Join us again next week at 5:30 p.m. on Love 101 Facebook and YouTube Live, and of course, Love 101 FM. And you will find us giving you another informative program. Thanks again to our special guest, Rochelle Amore. Rochelle, thanks for being with us. We learned so much from you. Thanks also to our show's producer, Kathy Gale, Open Door Communications, studio facilitator, Neeson Williams, and of course, you. Stay well, stay safe, stay blessed. I'm Tamaya Wilson.